The scream pierced the night air like a knife, carrying over the sound of crackling flames that devoured the old Wilkins barn outside Quartzsite, Arizona in the summer of 1883. Abigail Walker stood frozen at her bedroom window, watching in horror as the flames leaped higher, illuminating the darkness with an eerie orange glow. It took her only seconds to realize that someone was still inside Ellie Thornton, the rancher's daughter who had gone to check on a new foal born just that morning. Abigail flew down the stairs, her nightgown billowing behind her as she ran barefoot across the yard toward the inferno. The heat intensified with each step, scorching her skin even from 30 feet away. She could hear Ellie's desperate cries for help from within. "Ellie, I'm coming." Abigail shouted, but as she approached the barn doors, a burning beam crashed down just inches from her feet, sending a shower of embers into her face. She stumbled backward, shielding her eyes, the realization sinking in that she couldn't reach her friend. "Help, somebody help us." Abigail screamed, turning toward the cluster of buildings that made up the small ranch. The main house was dark. Mr. Thornton had gone to Prescott for supplies and wasn't expected back until morning. She whirled around at the sound of thundering hoofbeats approaching from the west. A lone rider galloped toward the burning barn, silhouetted against the night sky. He pulled his horse to a sharp halt, dust billowing around him as he leaped from the saddle. "Anyone inside?" he called, his voice deep and commanding. "Ellie Thornton, she's trapped." Abigail cried, pointing frantically at the barn. Without hesitation, the man pulled his bandana up over his nose and mouth, then ran toward the inferno. Abigail watched in disbelief as he disappeared into the flames. The seconds stretched into agonizing minutes as the fire roared, consuming the dry timber of the old structure. Just when Abigail had given up hope, a figure emerged from the smoke, the stranger, carrying Ellie in his arms. He staggered several yards from the burning building before gently laying the unconscious girl on the ground. Abigail rushed to her friend's side, tears of relief streaming down her face as she saw Ellie's chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. The stranger knelt beside them, removing his bandana to reveal a face streaked with soot and sweat. In the firelight, Abigail could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 25 or 26, with intense blue eyes that studied Ellie with concern. "She's breathed in a lot of smoke," he said, his voice raspy. "She needs care." "I'll take her to the house," Abigail said, attempting to lift her friend. "The house isn't safe," the man said, pointing to where embers were already landing on the roof of the Thornton home. "This fire's spreading fast." As if to confirm his words, there was an ominous crack as part of the barn's roof collapsed, sending a fresh wave of sparks into the night sky. The man made a quick decision. "My place is a half-hour ride from here. It's safe." He looked directly into Abigail's eyes. "Come with me, both of you." "But Mr. Thornton," Abigail began, "won't have anything to come back to if this keeps spreading," the man interrupted. "We need to move now." He gathered Ellie into his arms again and nodded toward his horse. "I'm Quentin McAllister. I have a ranch north of here." "You can trust me." Abigail hesitated only a moment before nodding. She had no choice. With the fire spreading and Ellie unconscious, they needed shelter and help immediately. "I'm Abigail Walker," she said, following him to his horse. Quentin hoisted Ellie onto the saddle before mounting behind her. He extended his hand to Abigail. "Take my hand." Abigail grasped his outstretched hand, allowing him to pull her up behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist, holding tight as the horse began to move, carrying them away from the devastation. As they rode through the darkness, Abigail looked back once more at the place that had been her home for the past 6 months. The barn was now fully engulfed, and flames had begun to lick at the corners of the main house. Everything she owned was in that house: her clothes, the locket her mother had given her before she died, the books she treasured. But none of that mattered now. Ellie was alive, and they were heading toward safety. "Live with me," Quentin said over his shoulder, his words nearly lost in the wind. "Both of you, at least until Thornton returns, or you can make other arrangements." Abigail tightened her grip around his waist, saying nothing. She didn't know this man, this Quentin McAllister, but he had risked his life to save Ellie, and right now he was their only hope. The journey to Quentin's ranch seemed to take forever. Abigail's arms ached from holding on, and her bare feet were freezing in the night air. Finally, they crested a hill, and she saw lights in the distance, a proper ranch house with a large barn and several outbuildings. Almost there, Quentin called back to her. As they approached, a door flew open and a man emerged with a lantern held high. "Quentin, that you?" "It's me, Ellis," Quentin called. "Get Martha, we've got injured." The next few minutes were a blur as they dismounted and carried Ellie into the house. A gray-haired woman, Martha, Abigail assumed, took charge immediately, directing them to place Ellie on a bed in a small room off the main living area. Abigail stayed by her friend's side while Martha tended to her, cleaning the soot from her face and applying a salve to her burned hands. "She'll be all right," Martha assured Abigail. "She's young and strong." Exhaustion suddenly washed over Abigail and she swayed on her feet. A strong hand caught her elbow, steadying her. She looked up to find Quentin beside her, his face now cleaned of soot, revealing a strong jawline and those same intense blue eyes. "You need rest too," he said gently. "I've had Martha prepare a room for you." "I should stay with Ellie," Abigail protested weakly. "Martha will watch over her through the night," Quentin assured her. "Come, you're about to collapse." He led her to a small but comfortable bedroom where she found a nightgown laid out on the bed. "It was my sister's," Quentin explained. "She left some things behind when she married and moved to California." Abigail nodded gratefully. "Thank you for everything." Quentin paused at the door. "Get some sleep, Miss Walker. We'll talk in the morning." After he left, Abigail changed into the borrowed nightgown and crawled beneath the covers of the unfamiliar bed. Despite her exhaustion, sleep didn't come easily. Her mind kept replaying the events of the night, the fire, the rescue, the ride through the darkness with a stranger. She had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was certain. Life as she knew it had changed forever. When Abigail awoke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the window. For a moment, she was disoriented, not recognizing her surroundings. Then the memories of the previous night came flooding back: the fire, Ellie's rescue, the stranger named Quentin McAllister who had brought them to his ranch. She sat up quickly. Ellie. She needed to check on Ellie. After hastily dressing in the clothes that had been left for her, a simple cotton dress that was slightly too large, Abigail made her way to the room where they had taken Ellie the night before. To her relief, she found her friend awake, though pale and weak, propped up against pillows while Martha spooned broth into her mouth. "Abigail," Ellie exclaimed hoarsely, her voice damaged from the smoke. "Don't try to talk too much," Martha admonished gently, but her eyes were kind as she looked up at Abigail. "Good morning, miss. There's coffee and breakfast in the kitchen when you're ready. Thank you." Abigail moved to Ellie's side, taking her bandaged hand carefully. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been trampled by a herd of cattle," Ellie whispered, managing a weak smile. "They told me what happened. That man saved my life." "He saved both our lives," Abigail corrected, thinking of how the fire had begun to spread to the main house. "Mr. McAllister." "Quentin," came a voice from the doorway. "Please call me Quentin." Abigail turned to see him standing there, hat in hand. In the daylight, she could see him clearly for the first time. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. His face was handsome in a rugged way, with those remarkable blue eyes that seemed to see right through her. "Mr. McAllister," Abigail began formally, "I cannot thank you enough for what you did last night." "Quentin," he insisted again with a slight smile, "and there's no need for thanks. Anyone would have done the same." But they both knew that wasn't true. Not everyone would have ridden into a burning barn to save a stranger. "Nevertheless, we are deeply grateful," Abigail said. "As soon as Ellie is well enough to travel, we'll make arrangements to—" "There's no rush," Quentin interrupted. "You're both welcome to stay as long as you need." He shifted his weight, seeming almost uncomfortable. "I rode out to the Thornton place at first light. I'm afraid there's not much left. The barn is completely gone and the house—" He trailed off, his expression somber. "The house," Abigail prompted, though she already suspected the answer. Burned to the ground, he confirmed gently. I'm sorry. Abigail closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the news, everything she owned gone. And poor Ellie, this was her home, her family's land. What about the horses, the cattle? Ellie asked, her voice breaking. Some got out, Quentin said. I rounded up what I could find, 3 horses and about a dozen head of cattle. They're safe in my south pasture now. Papa will be devastated, Ellie whispered, a tear sliding down her cheek. That ranch was everything to him after Mama died. Martha clicked her tongue sympathetically. Now, don't you fret about that right now, Miss Thornton. Your father will just be thankful you're alive. Everything else can be rebuilt. Martha's right, Quentin said. And I'll send Ellis into town today to leave word at the general store. Your father will hear about what happened as soon as he returns from Prescott. Abigail squeezed Ellie's hand reassuringly, though her own heart was heavy with worry. Where would they go? What would they do? Abigail had been working for the Thorntons as Ellie's companion and tutor for only 6 months, having come west from Boston after her parents' death left her with no means of support. Now she was adrift again, with not even a change of clothes to her name. As if reading her thoughts, Martha spoke up. I've laid out some more clothes for you both. They may need taking in a bit, but they'll do for now. Thank you, Abigail said sincerely. You've been so kind. It's nothing, Martha replied with a warm smile. Now come have some breakfast. You need to keep up your strength. Abigail followed Martha to the kitchen, where she found a simple but hearty meal waiting. Quentin joined them, sitting across the table from her. As they ate, he told her more about his ranch, the 2 Pines, he called it, after the pair of tall ponderosa pines that stood sentinel at the entrance to his property. I've been here 5 years now, he explained. Came out from Missouri with my sister Sarah after our parents died. She married and moved on, but I stayed. The land gets in your blood. It's a beautiful place, Abigail acknowledged, glancing out the window at the rolling pastures and the mountains in the distance. You've done well for yourself, Quentin shrugged modestly. I've been fortunate. The cattle market has been good, and I've got the best foreman in the territory in Ellis Johnson. He paused, studying her. What about you, Miss Walker? What brought you to Arizona Territory? Abigail told him briefly about her circumstances, her teaching position in Boston, the death of her parents, and the advertisement she'd answered from Mr. Thornton seeking a tutor for his 19-year-old daughter. Ellie wanted to learn more than just running a ranch, Abigail explained. She's interested in literature, history. She's very bright. And what about you? Quentin asked. Do you miss Boston? Abigail considered the question. I miss certain things, the libraries, the concerts, but there's a freedom here I never had there. A chance to be more than just someone's daughter or someone's wife. She smiled slightly. Though I admit I hadn't planned on being homeless and penniless. You're neither, Quentin said firmly. As I said last night, you can live with me, both of you, for as long as you need. Abigail's cheeks warmed at his directness. That's very generous, but we couldn't impose. It's not an imposition, he interrupted. This house is too big for just me, and it would do me good to have company. He hesitated, then added more softly, I meant what I said, Miss Walker. Stay. At least until you decide what you want to do next. There was something in his eyes, an earnestness, a kindness that made it difficult for Abigail to refuse. And practically speaking, they had few options until Mr. Thornton returned and decisions could be made about the future of the ranch. Thank you, she said finally. We accept your hospitality, at least for now. Quentin's smile transformed his face, making him look younger and even more handsome. Good, that's settled then. But as Abigail finished her breakfast, she wondered if anything was really settled. She was now living under the roof of a man she barely knew, in circumstances that would raise eyebrows in any society, let alone the small community of Quartzsite. And despite his kindness, Quentin McAllister remained a mystery to her, a man who had ridden out of the darkness to save them, and who now seemed determined to continue playing the role of rescuer. What she didn't yet understand was why. The next few days established a routine of sorts. Ellie grew stronger each day under Martha's attentive care, though she still tired easily and suffered from occasional coughing fits that left her breathless. Abigail divided her time between sitting with her friend and helping Martha with household tasks, grateful to be useful. Quentin was often absent during daylight hours, attending to ranch business, but he always returned for the evening meal, during which he would entertain them with stories of his day or ask Abigail questions about her life in Boston. She found herself looking forward to these conversations, drawn to his intelligence and quiet humor. On the fourth day, Ellis returned from town with news that Mr. Thornton had been located in Prescott and was on his way back. He would arrive the following afternoon. "He'll want to take you both back, I expect," Quentin said that evening as they sat on the porch after dinner, watching the sunset paint the western sky in hues of orange and purple. "To start rebuilding." "Yes, I imagine so," Abigail replied, though the thought filled her with unexpected reluctance. She had grown comfortable here at Two Pines with its orderly routine and peaceful atmosphere. "Mr. Thornton is nothing if not determined." Quentin was silent for a moment, his eyes on the horizon. "What about you? Will you stay on as Ellie's tutor?" Abigail sighed. "I don't know. Without a proper house, there will be no place for me, and Mr. Thornton may not be able to afford my services now with the cost of rebuilding. What will you do if you don't stay with the Thorntons?" "I'm not sure," Abigail admitted. "Perhaps look for another position in Prescott or Phoenix, or maybe even return to Boston, though I have no real ties there anymore." Quentin turned to look at her directly. "You could stay here." Abigail's heart skipped a beat at his words and the intensity in his gaze. "Here? But what would I do here?" "The same as you did for Ellie," he said. "Teach. There are children on neighboring ranches who could benefit from education, Martha's grandchildren, for instance. And the Hendersons have 4 boys who can barely write their names." The idea was intriguing. "You mean start a school?" "Why not? There's an old bunkhouse we don't use anymore. It could be converted." His eyes were alight with the possibility. "You could live here and teach during the day. The families would pay you directly." Abigail considered the proposal. It was an elegant solution to her predicament, and the thought of creating a school from nothing, of making a real difference in these children's lives, was appealing. But there was one aspect that gave her pause. "It would be inappropriate for me to continue living here alone," she said carefully. "People would talk. Martha lives here too," Quentin pointed out, "and you'd have your own space, complete privacy. Even so, it wouldn't be proper." Abigail shook her head. "I appreciate the offer, truly I do. But I need to consider all aspects of my situation." Quentin fell silent, his expression unreadable in the gathering dusk. Finally, he stood. "Think about it at least. Nothing needs to be decided tonight." The next day brought James Thornton, looking haggard and grief-stricken as he embraced his daughter. Abigail stood back, giving them space for their reunion, but he soon turned to her, taking her hands in his. "Miss Walker, I cannot thank you enough for your quick thinking that night. Ellis told me how you raised the alarm." "I did very little, sir," Abigail demurred. "It was Mr. McAllister who saved Ellie." Thornton turned to Quentin, who had been standing quietly nearby. "McAllister, I owe you a debt I can never repay. You saved my daughter's life." "No debt necessary," Quentin replied with a slight nod. "I'm just glad I was passing by when I was." "Nevertheless, I won't forget it," Thornton insisted. He looked around the comfortable living room of Quentin's home. "And you've given them shelter and care these past days, another debt I owe." "They were welcome company," Quentin said, his eyes briefly meeting Abigail's. Thornton sighed heavily. "I've seen what's left of my place. Not much to go back to, but I've already spoken to some men in town about starting to rebuild. We'll stay at the hotel in Quartzsite for now." "What about the cattle you lost?" Quentin asked. "I managed to round up a few head, but not many." "I'll start over," Thornton said determinedly. "I've done it before after my Caroline died. I can do it again." He turned to Abigail. "Miss Walker, I understand if you wish to seek a position elsewhere. I won't be able to provide proper accommodations for some time, and frankly, funds will be tight during rebuilding." Abigail had been expecting this, but it still stung to hear it spoken aloud. "I understand completely, Mr. Thornton. I've been considering my options." She could stay here, Quentin interjected. All eyes turned to him as he continued, explaining his idea for converting the bunkhouse into a schoolroom. Thornton listened thoughtfully, nodding. It's a good idea. The children around here could use proper schooling. He looked at Abigail. Would you consider it, Miss Walker? Abigail hesitated, caught off guard by Quentin bringing up the proposal in front of others. I haven't decided yet. As I mentioned to Mr. McAllister, there are considerations beyond just the practical aspects of teaching. Such as, Thornton asked, such as propriety, Abigail said, feeling her cheeks warm. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to continue residing in Mr. McAllister's home, regardless of how proper the arrangement might be. An awkward silence fell over the room. Ellie looked between Abigail and Quentin with wide eyes, while Thornton cleared his throat uncomfortably. It was Martha who broke the silence, bustling in from the kitchen. Begging your pardon for interrupting, but I couldn't help overhearing. Miss Walker, you could stay with me. I have a small cabin on the property. My grandson used to live there before he moved to Tucson. It's not much, but it would be yours and perfectly proper. Abigail looked at the older woman in surprise. That's very kind of you, Martha. Not at all, Martha said with a warm smile. I'd enjoy the company. Gets lonely out here sometimes. Quentin was watching Abigail intently. Would that resolve your concerns, Miss Walker? Abigail felt cornered, not ready to make such a momentous decision on the spot. I would need to think about it. This is all happening very quickly. Of course, Thornton said, coming to her rescue. Take all the time you need. But know that there's a place for you here if you want it. He turned to Quentin. McAllister, would you show me those cattle of mine you managed to save? I'd like to see what I've got left. The two men went outside, leaving Abigail with Ellie and Martha. As soon as they were gone, Ellie leaned forward eagerly. You should stay, Abigail. It's perfect. You could teach, have your own place, and she broke off, her eyes twinkling mischievously. And what? Abigail asked suspiciously. And get to know Mr. McAllister better, Ellie finished with a grin. Don't pretend you haven't noticed how he looks at you. Ellie, Abigail exclaimed, scandalized, that has nothing to do with my decision, doesn't it? Ellie teased. I've seen you watching him too. Martha chuckled, shaking her head as she gathered up the tea things. Miss Ellie has a point, though she shouldn't be quite so forward about it. Mr. Quentin is a good man, Miss Walker, the best I know, been like a son to me since he came to these parts. Abigail sighed, unable to deny to herself that Quentin McAllister had begun to occupy her thoughts more than was strictly proper. There was something about him, his quiet strength, his thoughtfulness, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, that drew her to him. But she had always prided herself on being practical and level-headed. My decision will be based on what's best for my future, she said firmly. Not on anything else. But as she helped Ellie pack her few belongings for the move to the hotel in Quartzsite, Abigail couldn't stop her thoughts from returning to Quentin, and to the possibility of building a new life here, close to him. That evening, after the Thorntons had departed with promises to visit soon, Abigail found herself alone with Quentin once more. They sat on the porch as had become their custom, the twilight deepening around them. I apologize if I put you on the spot earlier, Quentin said after a comfortable silence. It wasn't my intention to force your hand. I know, Abigail replied softly, and I appreciate the opportunity you're offering. It's just that I've always tried to be careful about my reputation. As a woman alone in the world, it's one of the few things I can control. Quentin nodded, understanding in his eyes. Martha's offer seems to address that concern. Her cabin is separate enough for privacy but close enough for propriety's sake. Yes, it does seem like a good solution, Abigail admitted, but you're still hesitant, Quentin observed. Why? Abigail looked out at the darkening landscape, gathering her thoughts. I suppose I'm afraid of making another mistake. When I came west, I thought I was starting a new chapter in my life. Then the fire happened, and suddenly I'm having to start over again. What if I choose wrong? What does your heart tell you? Quentin asked quietly. The question caught her off guard with its directness. My heart. Yes, your heart, Quentin repeated, turning to face her fully. Not your practical mind, not your concern for propriety or security. What do you want, Abigail? It was the first time he had used her given name, and it sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the evening chill. "I want to be useful," she said slowly. "I want to teach. I want to make a difference in children's lives." She paused, then added more softly, "And I want to be somewhere I can belong." "You could belong here," Quentin said, his voice low and earnest. He reached out, taking her hand in his. "I know we've only known each other a short time, but I feel as though—" He trailed off, then started again. "When I pulled you from that fire, something changed for me. I can't explain it, but I know that I want you to stay, not just as a teacher, but as—" He didn't finish the sentence, but his meaning was clear in the way he held her gaze, in the gentle pressure of his hand on hers. Abigail's heart raced. This was happening too fast, and yet it felt as though they had been moving toward this moment from the first time he had said those words. "Live with me, Quentin," she began, uncertain what she was going to say next, but she was saved from having to decide by Martha's appearance at the door. "Excuse me," the older woman said, her tone apologetic. "There's a rider coming. Looks like Ellis, and he's in a hurry." Quentin released Abigail's hand reluctantly and stood, squinting into the darkness. Sure enough, a horseman was galloping toward the house, the sound of hoofbeats growing louder. Ellis reined in his horse sharply, dismounting before it had fully stopped. "Quentin, there's trouble in town. The Shelton gang's there, drinking and looking for a fight. Word is they're asking about you." Quentin's expression hardened. "Why would they be looking for me?" "Something about you interfering with their cattle rustling operation last month," Ellis explained, breathing hard. "They're saying you cost them a fortune by warning the Henderson place about their plans." "I did," Quentin acknowledged grimly, "and I'd do it again." "Well, they're not happy about it," Ellis said, "and they're getting drunker and meaner by the minute. Sheriff's worried they might decide to ride out here." Quentin nodded, his jaw set. "I'll go into town, try to defuse the situation." "No." Abigail exclaimed, surprising herself with the force of her objection. "That's exactly what they want. It could be a trap." Quentin looked at her, his expression softening slightly. "I can't hide here while they terrorize the town, Abigail. Then let me come with you," she said impulsively. "Absolutely not," he replied firmly. "It's too dangerous." He turned to Ellis. "Ride to the Henderson place, get Jacob and his boys, tell them to meet me in town. Martha," he added, turning to the housekeeper, "get my rifle from the study." As Martha hurried to comply, Quentin took Abigail's hands in his. "Stay here, lock the doors. Ellis will be back as soon as he's warned the Hendersons." His thumbs traced small circles on her palms. "I need to know you're safe." Abigail wanted to argue, to insist on accompanying him, but she recognized the futility of it. Instead, she squeezed his hands. "Be careful, please." "I will," he promised, his eyes holding hers for a long moment. Then Martha returned with his rifle, and the spell was broken. Quentin strapped on his gun belt, checked his pistol, and took the rifle. With one last look at Abigail, he strode to his horse, mounted, and galloped off into the night, Ellis close behind. Abigail stood on the porch watching until the sound of hoofbeats faded away, her heart filled with a fear she had never known before. The hours that followed were among the longest of Abigail's life. She and Martha kept vigil in the living room, jumping at every sound from outside. Martha tried to distract her with stories of Quentin's early days at Two Pines, but Abigail found it impossible to focus, her thoughts continually returning to Quentin riding into a potentially deadly confrontation. "He's a capable man," Martha reassured her, patting her hand. "And he's got friends in town. He'll be all right." Abigail nodded, wanting to believe it. "Who are these Sheltons? Why would they risk coming into town just to confront Quentin?" Martha's expression darkened. "The Shelton gang's been a plague on this territory for years. Rustling, robbery, worse. 3 brothers and a handful of no-goods who ride with them. They're not men to cross, which is exactly what Quentin did when he warned the Hendersons about their plan to steal their prize bulls." "He didn't tell me about any of this," Abigail said, hurt that Quentin had kept such danger from her. "He wouldn't," Martha replied with a small smile, "not his way to worry others with his troubles." She studied Abigail's face. "You care for him, don't you?" Abigail looked down at her clasped hands. "I've only known him a few days." "Some things don't take long to know," Martha said wisely. I saw it the moment he brought you two girls here that night, the way he looked at you. I knew then this ranch was about to change. Before Abigail could respond, the sound of approaching riders caught their attention. Martha moved to the window, peering out cautiously. "It's Ellis," she reported with relief, "and he's alone, which I take to mean there's no immediate danger." They hurried to the door as Ellis dismounted. His expression was grim but not defeated as he climbed the porch steps. "What happened?" Abigail asked anxiously. "Where's Quentin?" "He's fine," Ellis assured her quickly, "or he will be. Got a nasty cut on his arm, but Doc Simmons is patching him up. He sent me to tell you not to worry." "What happened?" Martha repeated Abigail's question, ushering Ellis inside. Ellis sank gratefully into a chair, accepting the cup of coffee Martha poured for him. The Sheltons were drunk and looking for trouble, started shooting up the saloon when the barkeep tried to cut them off. By the time Quentin and I got there, Sheriff Hayes had them cornered, but they were threatening to burn the place down with everyone in it. "Good Lord," Martha muttered. Quentin talked to them, Ellis continued. "Tried to reason with them, get them to come out peacefully. For a minute there, I thought it might work, but then Luke Shelton, the youngest, meanest one, decided to make a break for it. Started shooting." Ellis shook his head grimly. "Sheriff got hit in the shoulder. Quentin took a bullet grazed to his arm trying to get to the sheriff. That's when the Henderson boys arrived. With the odds evened up, the Sheltons surrendered." "So they're in custody now?" Abigail asked, her heart still racing at the thought of Quentin being shot. Ellis nodded. "Locked up tight. Sheriff's deputy is watching them while Doc tends to Hayes and Quentin." He glanced at Abigail, seeming to notice her distress. "Quentin's fine, Miss Walker, truly. He insisted I come tell you so you wouldn't worry, said to tell you he'll be home by morning. Home." The word resonated through Abigail with unexpected force. In just a few days, she had come to think of this place as home, or at least as a place where she could make a home. "Thank you, Ellis," she said sincerely. "I appreciate you riding all the way back to let us know." "No trouble, miss," Ellis replied, stifling a yawn, "though I should get some sleep now, been a long night." After Ellis had gone to his quarters and Martha had retired to her room, Abigail found herself unable to sleep. She returned to the porch, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the cool night air. The stars were brilliant overhead, the silence of the ranch broken only by the occasional sound of a night bird or distant coyote. As she stood there, Abigail realized she had made her decision. She would stay. She would accept Quentin's offer to teach and Martha's offer of the cabin. She would build a new life here where she had found not just refuge after disaster, but also purpose, and perhaps even, dare she think it, love. The possibility both terrified and exhilarated her. She barely knew Quentin McAllister, and yet she felt drawn to him in ways she had never experienced before. Was this how it happened? This sudden, unexpected connection that defied logic and caution. Abigail stayed on the porch until the first light of dawn began to streak the eastern sky. And as the world slowly brightened around her, she saw a lone rider approaching from the direction of town. Even at a distance, she recognized Quentin's straight-backed posture in the saddle. Relief flooded through her, and without thinking, she hurried down the porch steps and across the yard toward him. Quentin spotted her and urged his horse to a faster pace. When he reached her, he dismounted quickly, wincing slightly as the movement jarred his injured arm. "Abigail," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion but his eyes bright as they met hers. "You should be asleep." "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. "Not until I knew you were safe." His expression softened. "I'm sorry I worried you." Abigail's eyes went to his left arm where a bandage was visible beneath his torn sleeve. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," he assured her. "Just a graze. Doc Simmons cleaned and bandaged it. I'll be good as new in a week." Abigail's relief gave way to a surge of emotion, fear for what might have happened, gratitude that he was standing before her relatively unharmed, and something deeper, something she wasn't quite ready to name. "You could have been killed," she said, her voice catching. Quentin stepped closer, his free hand coming up to touch her cheek gently. "But I wasn't. I'm here, Abigail." The tenderness in his touch undid her. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over despite her efforts to contain them. when Ellis told us you'd been shot." "SHH," Quentin murmured, drawing her to him. He wrapped his uninjured arm around her, holding her close. "I'm all right. Everything's all right now." Abigail let herself lean into his embrace, the solid warmth of him reassuring her in a way words could not. They stood like that for several moments, the early morning sun washing over them as the ranch began to stir to life around them. Finally, Abigail stepped back, composing herself. "You must be exhausted. You should rest." Quentin's hand slid down her arm to capture her fingers. "I will. But first, have you thought any more about staying, about teaching here?" Abigail nodded, a small smile curving her lips. "I have, and I've decided to accept your offer if it still stands." The fatigue seemed to fall away from Quentin's face, replaced by a joy that took her breath away. "It stands." "It definitely stands." He squeezed her hand. "You won't regret it, Abigail, I promise you that." Looking into his earnest blue eyes, Abigail believed him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever uncertainties, she knew with sudden clarity that this was where she was meant to be, not just at Two Pines Ranch, but here, with this man who had pulled her from the fire and into a new life. The next few weeks passed in a flurry of activity as Abigail settled into her new role at Two Pines Ranch. Martha's grandson's cabin proved to be a cozy, comfortable space after a thorough cleaning and some minor repairs. Quentin insisted on furnishing it properly, ordering a writing desk and bookshelf from Prescott, along with several crates of books for the school. The old bunkhouse, meanwhile, was transformed into a schoolroom under Abigail's direction. Quentin and Ellis built simple desks and benches, while Martha sewed curtains for the windows. By the time Abigail sent out word to neighboring ranches that classes would begin at the start of the next month, the schoolhouse was ready to welcome its first pupils. Ellie and her father visited frequently during this time, helping with preparations. James Thornton had decided to rebuild his ranch on a smaller scale initially, focusing first on a modest house and barn. He had hired men from Quartzsite to assist and estimated they would be able to move back to their own land by winter. "Papa says I should continue my education with you," Ellie told Abigail one afternoon as they arranged books on the new shelves. "Not as a regular pupil with the children, of course, but perhaps a few times a week." "I'd like that very much," Abigail replied warmly. "Though I suspect you could teach the advanced literature class by now. You've read more Shakespeare than most college professors I know." Ellie laughed, her eyes bright with excitement. "Perhaps I could help with the younger children sometimes. I've always thought I might like to teach someday." "That would be wonderful," Abigail said, pleased by her friend's enthusiasm. She hesitated, then asked casually, "How are things between you and your father? He seems to be in better spirits." "He is," Ellie confirmed. "I think losing the ranch made him realize what truly matters. He talks about Mama more now, shares memories of her that he used to keep to himself." She glanced at Abigail with a mischievous smile. "And he approves of your arrangement here, by the way. Says Mr. McAllister is one of the finest men he knows, though he was a bit surprised by how quickly you two became close." Abigail felt heat rise to her cheeks. "We're not, that is, Mr. McAllister and I are merely—" "Oh, please," Ellie interrupted with a laugh. "Everyone can see the way you look at each other. It's quite romantic, actually. Rescued from a burning barn, carried to safety by a handsome rancher who offers you a new life." "Ellie." Abigail exclaimed, embarrassed but unable to suppress a smile. "It's not like that. We're friends, colleagues of a sort." "If you say so," Ellie replied, clearly unconvinced, "but I think it's wonderful. After everything you've been through, you deserve happiness, Abigail." Abigail didn't respond, unsure what to say. The truth was, her feelings for Quentin had only deepened in the weeks since she had decided to stay. They spent time together daily, discussing plans for the school, sharing meals, sometimes simply sitting on the porch in the evening, talking about everything and nothing. He was unfailingly respectful of her position and her reputation, never overstepping boundaries. But there was a warmth in his eyes when he looked at her that made her heart beat faster. Yet neither of them had spoken of the moment on the porch the night of the Shelton incident, when he had almost declared feelings beyond friendship. Sometimes, Abigail wondered if she had imagined the intensity of that exchange, if her own growing attachment had colored her perception. Abigail. Ellie's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "You're miles away." "Sorry," Abigail apologized, refocusing on the task at hand. "Just thinking about the lessons I need to prepare." Ellie gave her a knowing look but didn't press further. "Well, I should be getting back. Papa will be wondering where I've gone off to." As they walked back to the main house, they spotted Quentin returning from the south pasture on horseback. He raised a hand in greeting when he saw them, changing course to meet them by the corral. "Ladies," he said, dismounting with easy grace. "How goes the schoolhouse?" "Nearly ready," Abigail reported. "The books you ordered are perfect. I was just telling Ellie that she should help with the younger students occasionally." "An excellent idea," Quentin agreed, smiling at Ellie. "You've got a natural way with children from what I've seen." Ellie beamed at the compliment. "I'd like that, though I'm sure I'll learn as much from watching Abigail teach as the children will." Quentin's gaze shifted to Abigail, his expression softening. "I have no doubt of that. She's quite remarkable." Abigail felt that familiar warmth spread through her at his words and the look in his eyes. "You're both being far too generous. I haven't taught a single lesson yet." "But you will," Quentin said confidently, "and you'll be extraordinary." The conviction in his voice left Abigail momentarily speechless. It was Ellie who broke the silence, her eyes dancing with amusement as she glanced between them. "Well, I should be going. Papa's waiting." She gave Abigail a quick hug. "I'll see you tomorrow for the final preparations." After Ellie had departed in the wagon that had brought her to Two Pines, Abigail and Quentin found themselves alone by the corral. The late afternoon sun bathed everything in golden light, casting long shadows across the yard. "You've accomplished so much in such a short time," Quentin observed, leaning against the fence. "The schoolhouse looks better than it ever did as a bunkhouse." "It's been a group effort," Abigail reminded him. "I couldn't have done any of it without you, Martha. Everyone has been so supportive." "Because they believe in what you're doing," Quentin said. "As do I." He paused, then asked, "Are you happy here, Abigail, with your decision to stay?" The question caught her off guard with its directness, but she didn't hesitate in her answer. "Yes, very happy." Quentin's smile was warm with relief, as though he had been genuinely concerned about her contentment. "I'm glad. I've been wanting to ask you something." "Yes," Abigail prompted when he fell silent. "There's a social in town next Saturday, dancing, food, the usual festivities." He cleared his throat slightly. "I was hoping you might accompany me." Abigail's heart quickened. This was more than just an invitation to a community event, it was a public declaration of sorts. If she attended the social as Quentin's companion, the entire town would draw certain conclusions about their relationship. "I'd like that," she said softly, making her own declaration in return. The smile that spread across Quentin's face was worth any gossip that might ensue. "Good, that's good." He straightened from his relaxed position against the fence. "I should see to my horse. Will you join us for dinner tonight?" "Of course," Abigail replied. Though she now had her own cabin and could prepare her own meals, she still often dined at the main house with Quentin, Martha, and Ellis. It had become a pleasant routine, one she looked forward to each day. As Quentin led his horse toward the barn, Abigail watched him go, a sense of contentment settling over her. Whatever happened next, she knew she had made the right choice in staying at Two Pines. The social in Quartzsite was the highlight of the summer season, with nearly everyone in the surrounding area gathering in the town square for an evening of music, dancing, and community fellowship. Abigail had spent hours preparing for the event, pressing her best dress, one of the few items Martha had managed to find that fit her properly, and arranging her hair in a style more elaborate than her usual simple bun. When Quentin arrived at her cabin to escort her to town, his appreciative gaze made all the effort worthwhile. He was dressed in his finest as well, a dark suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the lean strength of his frame. "You look beautiful," he said simply, offering her his arm. "Thank you," Abigail replied, accepting both the compliment and his arm with a smile. "You're quite handsome yourself." The ride to town in Quentin's buggy was filled with comfortable conversation and occasional comfortable silences. Abigail found herself sneaking glances at his profile, admiring the strong line of his jaw and the way the setting sun turned his dark hair to bronze. The town square was festooned with lanterns and bunting when they arrived, the bandstand already occupied by local musicians tuning their instruments. Tables laden with food surrounded the dance area, where several couples were already circling to a lively tune. As they made their way through the crowd, Abigail was struck by how many people greeted Quentin warmly and how many curious glances were directed her way. She had met some of the townspeople during her time with the Thorntons, but clearly news of her new position at Two Pines had spread. Mr. McAllister, a portly man with an impressive mustache, approached them, hand extended. "Good to see you, sir, and this must be Miss Walker, our new school teacher." "Mayor Collins," Quentin acknowledged, shaking the man's hand. "Yes, this is Miss Abigail Walker, Abigail Mayor Joseph Collins." "A pleasure, Miss Walker," Collins said, beaming at her. "My wife and I were just saying how fortunate we are to have a trained educator in our community. Our youngest, Timothy, will be among your pupils, I understand." "The pleasure is mine, Mayor Collins," Abigail replied warmly. "And yes, I've received Timothy's enrollment. I look forward to meeting him properly on Monday." The mayor beamed. "Excellent, excellent. Well, I won't keep you from enjoying the festivities. I'm sure you'll want to introduce Miss Walker around, Quentin." As the mayor moved on to greet other arrivals, Quentin guided Abigail toward the refreshment table. "I think you've made a conquest there," he murmured, amusement in his voice. "Collins has been lobbying for a proper school in Quartzsite for years." "Well, we're not quite in Quartzsite," Abigail pointed out, "but I'm happy to welcome students from town as well as the surrounding ranches." "Speaking of students," Quentin said, nodding toward a group approaching them. "The Hendersons." Jacob Henderson, a burly man with a weathered face and kind eyes, introduced his wife Sarah and their 4 sons, ranging in age from 6 to 14. All 4 boys regarded Abigail with a mixture of curiosity and trepidation. "Boys, this is Miss Walker, your new teacher," Henderson said firmly. "You'll mind what she says and work hard, you hear?" "Yes, sir," the boys chorused, though the oldest, William, Abigail recalled from her enrollment list, looked less than enthusiastic about the prospect of school. "I'm looking forward to having you in class," Abigail said sincerely. "We're going to learn a great many interesting things together." "Can we learn about Indians and battles and stuff?" asked the youngest boy, his eyes wide with hope. Abigail smiled at his eagerness. "We certainly will study the history of this territory, including the native peoples who were here first, and many other subjects as well." This seemed to satisfy the boy, and after a few more minutes of conversation, the Hendersons moved on, allowing others to approach and meet the new teacher. By the time the formal dancing began, Abigail had been introduced to most of the families whose children would be attending her school, as well as various town dignitaries and business owners. "You've charmed them all," Quentin observed as they took their places for the first dance. "Not that I'm surprised. They've been very welcoming," Abigail replied, somewhat overwhelmed by the warm reception. "I only hope I can live up to their expectations." "You will," Quentin assured her. He placed one hand at her waist and took her hand with the other as the music began. "You already have." Dancing with Quentin was like nothing Abigail had experienced before. Though the steps were familiar, a simple waltz, the feeling of his hand at her waist, the warmth in his blue eyes as they moved together, created a heady sensation that left her slightly breathless. They fit together perfectly, as though they had been dancing as partners for years rather than minutes. "You dance well," she commented, trying to maintain some semblance of normal conversation despite the butterflies in her stomach. "My mother insisted on lessons when I was younger," Quentin replied with a small smile. "Said no son of hers would embarrass her at social functions by stumbling around like a newborn colt." Abigail laughed at the image. She was wise. Many mothers neglect that aspect of a son's education. "And you?" Quentin asked, guiding her expertly through a turn. "Where did you learn to dance so gracefully? Miss Hathaway's school for young ladies considered dancing an essential skill, Abigail explained. We practiced for hours each week. I used to dread it, but now I'm grateful. As am I, Quentin said softly, his grip tightening slightly as he drew her a fraction closer. They danced 3 consecutive dances before taking a break for refreshments. As Quentin went to fetch them punch, Abigail found herself approached by Ellie, who was attending the social with her father. "You two make a striking couple," Ellie said without preamble, her eyes bright with pleasure. "Everyone's talking about it." "Ellie," Abigail protested, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "We're not a couple, we're friends and colleagues of a sort." "Colleagues don't look at each other the way he looks at you," Ellie observed shrewdly. "Or the way you look at him, for that matter." Before Abigail could formulate a response, Quentin returned with 2 cups of punch. He greeted Ellie warmly, seemingly unaware of the conversation he had interrupted. The evening continued with more dancing, conversation, and laughter. As the hour grew late and the festivities began to wind down, Quentin suggested they take a brief walk before heading back to Two Pines. Abigail readily agreed, her feet sore from dancing but her spirit still buoyant from the enjoyable evening. They strolled along the main street of Quartzsite, now quiet and mostly deserted as the townsfolk returned to their homes. The night was clear, the stars brilliant overhead, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of sage and distant rain. "Thank you for accompanying me tonight," Quentin said as they walked. "I can't remember when I've enjoyed a social more." "Nor can I," Abigail admitted. Everyone was so kind and welcoming. "They recognize quality when they see it," Quentin replied, his hand brushing against hers as they walked. After a moment's hesitation, he took her hand in his, entwining their fingers. "Abigail, there's something I've been wanting to tell you." The seriousness in his tone made Abigail's heart skip a beat. "What is it?" Quentin stopped walking, turning to face her. In the moonlight, his expression was solemn yet tender. "From the moment I pulled you from that burning barn, something changed for me. I can't explain it exactly, but it was as though I'd found something I didn't even know I was looking for." Abigail's breath caught in her throat at his words, so similar to her own feelings. "These past weeks," Quentin continued, "getting to know you, watching you create this school from nothing, seeing your kindness and your strength, I've come to care for you deeply." He paused, his eyes searching hers. "I know it hasn't been long, and I don't want to rush you or make you uncomfortable, but I wanted you to know how I feel." Abigail felt a surge of emotion, joy, tenderness, and a touch of fear at the intensity of her own feelings. "I care for you too, Quentin," she admitted softly. "More than I thought possible in such a short time." The smile that spread across his face at her words was like the sun breaking through clouds. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "May I call on you properly then? Court you as you deserve to be courted." "Yes," Abigail whispered, her heart full. "I'd like that very much." They stood there for a long moment, hands clasped, the night wrapping around them like a cloak. Then, with a gentleness that took her breath away, Quentin leaned forward and brushed his lips against hers in a kiss so tender it brought tears to her eyes. When they parted, Abigail saw in his face the same wonder she felt that something so profound could grow from the ashes of tragedy, that fate or providence had brought them together on that fiery night that now seemed both recent and distant. "We should head back," Quentin said reluctantly. "It's getting late." The ride back to Two Pines was quiet but comfortable, a new understanding between them that needed no words. When they reached her cabin, Quentin helped her down from the buggy and walked her to her door. "Good night, Abigail," he said softly. "Thank you for a wonderful evening." "Good night, Quentin," she replied, smiling up at him. As she watched him drive back toward the main house, Abigail felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was where she belonged, not just at Two Pines Ranch teaching children, but here, with this man who had saved her from the fire and stolen her heart in the process. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a perfect late summer day. Abigail hummed to herself as she prepared breakfast in her cabin, her thoughts continually returning to the previous evening, the dancing, the conversations, and most of all, that perfect moment under the stars when Quentin had declared his feelings. A knock at her door interrupted her reverie. She opened it to find Martha standing there, a basket over her arm. "Good morning, dear," the older woman greeted her cheerfully. "I brought you some fresh biscuits and preserves, thought you might enjoy them after your late night." "That's very kind, Martha." "Please come in," Abigail invited, touched by the thoughtful gesture. As Martha set the basket on the small table, she gave Abigail a knowing look. "I hear the social was quite successful. Ellis says you and Quentin were the talk of the town." Abigail felt her cheeks warm. News travels fast. "That it does," Martha agreed with a chuckle. "Especially when it involves the most eligible bachelor in the county and the new schoolteacher." She patted Abigail's hand. "Don't mind me, I'm just happy to see Quentin smiling again. He deserves some joy in his life, and so do you." "Thank you," Abigail said sincerely, "for everything you've done to make me feel welcome here." "Pshaw," Martha dismissed with a wave of her hand. "It's been my pleasure. Now eat those biscuits while they're warm. You've got a busy day ahead, what with school starting tomorrow." After Martha left, Abigail spent the morning reviewing her lesson plans and organizing materials for the first day of classes. She was so absorbed in her preparations that she didn't hear approaching footsteps until a knock sounded at her open door. "Quentin," she exclaimed, surprised and pleased to see him standing there. "Good morning." "Good morning," he replied, a warm smile lighting his features. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," Abigail assured him, setting aside her notes, "just making some final preparations for tomorrow." Quentin nodded, his expression turning slightly more serious. "That's partly why I'm here. I received a letter from the territorial superintendent of schools this morning." He held up an official-looking envelope. "It seems word of our little school has reached Phoenix." Abigail felt a flutter of anxiety. "Is there a problem?" "Quite the opposite," Quentin said, handing her the letter. "They're pleased to hear of the initiative and want to provide support books, supplies, even a small stipend for the teacher." Abigail scanned the letter quickly, her excitement growing with each paragraph. "This is wonderful. With these resources, we can expand what we offer, perhaps even accommodate more students." "There's one condition," Quentin pointed out, a hint of hesitation in his voice. "The teacher needs to be properly certified by the territory." Abigail frowned slightly. "But I am certified. At least I was in Massachusetts." "They'll need documentation," Quentin explained. "The letter suggests you travel to Phoenix to meet with the superintendent and present your credentials." "It would only be for a few days." "Of course," Abigail agreed readily. "When should I go?" "That's the thing," Quentin said, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of mild frustration. "The timing is poor with school starting tomorrow. But they've requested you come as soon as possible this week, if you can manage it." Abigail considered the dilemma. She had been so looking forward to welcoming her students, to seeing her careful preparations come to fruition. But the opportunity for official recognition and support was too important to delay. "I could go after the first day," she suggested. "At least meet the children and give them assignments to work on while I'm away. Ellie could perhaps supervise for the few days I'll be gone." Quentin's face brightened. "That's an excellent solution. I'm sure Ellie would be happy to help." He hesitated, then added, "I'd offer to accompany you to Phoenix, but with the cattle drive coming up." "I understand," Abigail assured him quickly. "I'll be fine traveling alone. The stage is perfectly safe, and I'm sure I can find suitable accommodations in Phoenix." Quentin looked relieved but still concerned. "I'll arrange everything: your ticket, a room at a reputable hotel, and I'll wire ahead to the superintendent's office to inform them of your arrival." "Thank you," Abigail said, touched by his thoughtfulness. Quentin's expression softened as he looked at her. "I'd planned to ask you to go riding with me this afternoon, show you more of the ranch now that you're officially a resident. But I understand if you need to continue your preparations for tomorrow." "I think a ride would be perfect," Abigail decided. "I could use a break, and I'd love to see more of Two Pines." The delight on Quentin's face was reward enough for setting aside her work. "I'll saddle the horses and come for you in an hour then." After he left, Abigail returned to her lesson plans with renewed energy. The prospect of official recognition for her little school filled her with pride and excitement. And the thought of spending the afternoon with Quentin, exploring the ranch that was becoming her home, added a warmth to her heart that had nothing to do with the summer heat. True to his word, Quentin returned an hour later with 2 saddled horses. Abigail had changed into her riding skirt, another item from Martha's seemingly endless supply of clothing in various sizes, and joined him outside. "This is Daisy," Quentin said, introducing her to a gentle-looking sorrel mare. "She's sweet-tempered and steady. Perfect for someone who doesn't ride often." "She's beautiful," Abigail commented, stroking the horse's velvety nose. Though not an experienced rider, she had taken lessons as a girl and felt comfortable enough in the saddle for a leisurely ride. Quentin helped her mount, his hands strong and sure at her waist. Once she was settled, he swung up onto his own horse, a powerful bay gelding named Thunder. They set off at a walk, heading west across the pastures toward a line of trees in the distance. "The property extends to those cottonwoods along the creek," Quentin explained as they rode. "About 2,000 acres altogether, not the biggest ranch in the territory, but good land with plenty of water." "It's beautiful," Abigail said sincerely, admiring the rolling landscape with its mix of grasslands and scrubby mesquite, all set against the backdrop of distant mountains. "You've built something wonderful here, Quentin." He glanced at her, a shadow of old grief passing briefly across his face. "I wish my parents could have seen it. My father always dreamed of having land like this, but he never made it west. And Sarah, my sister, she loved it here, but her husband's work took them to California. Do you see them often, your sister and her husband?" "Not as often as I'd like," Quentin admitted. "They have 3 children now. I've only met the youngest once, when he was a baby." "Perhaps they could visit someday," Abigail suggested, "or you could go to California." "Perhaps," Quentin agreed. "Though it's hard to get away for long with the ranch to manage," he smiled at her. "But it would be nice to introduce them to you." The implication that she would still be part of his life for such a future visit warmed Abigail deeply. "I'd like that," she said softly. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, climbing a gentle slope that offered a panoramic view of the surrounding countryside. From this vantage point, Abigail could see the main buildings of 2 pines in the distance, looking small and picturesque against the vast landscape. "When I first came here," Quentin said, following her gaze, "there was nothing but an abandoned line shack and that old bunkhouse. Every building you see I built with these hands and the help of good men like Ellis." "You should be proud," Abigail told him earnestly. "What you've accomplished is remarkable." Quentin turned to look at her, his expression suddenly intense. "It didn't feel complete until now, until you came." Abigail's heart quickened at his words. "Quentin, I know it's too soon," he said quickly. "I know we're just beginning to know each other, but I want you to understand that you've brought something to 2 Pines that was missing before: light, purpose, hope." He reached across the space between their horses to take her hand. "When I found you in that burning barn, I had no idea I was also finding my future." Abigail was momentarily speechless, overwhelmed by the emotion in his voice and the sincerity in his eyes. "I feel the same," she finally managed to say. "Coming west was a leap of faith for me. Losing everything in the fire was devastating, but now—" She squeezed his hand. "Now I can see that it was all leading me here, to this place, to you." The smile that spread across Quentin's face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. He guided his horse closer to hers, leaning across to kiss her gently, his hand coming up to cradle her cheek. It was a perfect moment, the beautiful landscape spread out around them, the warmth of the sun on their faces, and the sweet connection between them that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. As they continued their ride, exploring the creek and the stand of cottonwoods before heading back toward the ranch, Abigail felt a sense of rightness, of belonging, that she had never experienced before. Whatever challenges lay ahead, the trip to Phoenix, establishing the school, navigating the complexities of their growing relationship, she knew with certainty that this was where she was meant to be. The first day of school dawned bright and clear, with a hint of autumn in the air despite the lingering summer heat. Abigail arrived at the schoolhouse an hour early, arranging books and slates, writing a welcome message on the blackboard, and placing a vase of wildflowers on her desk, a touch of beauty for this momentous day. By 8 o'clock, wagons and horses began arriving, bringing children from the surrounding ranches and farms. Parents accompanied their youngsters, wanting to meet the teacher and see the schoolhouse for themselves. Abigail greeted each family warmly, taking special care to put the more nervous children at ease. "Good morning, William," she said to Jacob Henderson's oldest son, who hung back while his younger brothers rushed eagerly into the schoolhouse. "I'm glad you're here." The 14-year-old shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "Pa says I have to come." "Well, I hope you'll find it worthwhile," Abigail replied, undeterred by his lack of enthusiasm. "I'm counting on your help with the younger students, actually. I understand you're quite good with numbers." This caught his attention. "I am, your father mentioned it," Abigail confirmed, "and I'll need someone to assist with the arithmetic lessons for the little ones." A hint of pride flickered across William's face. "I could do that, I guess." "Excellent," Abigail said with a smile. "Why don't you go in and find your seat? We'll be starting soon." By 8:30, all 17 of her enrolled students had arrived, ranging in age from 6 to 14. Ellie had come as well, not as a student but as an assistant, just as they had planned. She would help during today's lessons, and then take over for the few days Abigail would be in Phoenix. Quentin made a brief appearance just before Abigail called the class to order, standing at the back of the room with an encouraging smile. "You'll be magnificent," he murmured as he passed her desk. "I'll see you this evening." The day flew by in a blur of introductions, assessments, and establishing routines. Abigail had forgotten how energizing it was to teach, to see young minds engage with new ideas and information. Even William Henderson, initially so reluctant, showed interest during the history lesson when Abigail described the adventures of early explorers in the Southwest. By the end of the day, when parents began arriving to collect their children, Abigail was exhausted but exhilarated. The students left chattering excitedly about what they had learned and what tomorrow would bring, clutching the simple homework assignments she had given them. "That was wonderful," Ellie declared once the last child had departed. "You're an amazing teacher, Abigail." "Those children adore you already." "Thank you," Abigail replied, sinking gratefully into her chair. "It went better than I dared hope, and thank you for agreeing to take over while I'm away. I've prepared lessons for each day, and Martha has promised to help if you need anything." "We'll manage beautifully," Ellie assured her. "You focus on impressing that superintendent and getting us all the books and supplies we need." After tidying the schoolroom and reviewing plans for the following day with Ellie, Abigail walked back to her cabin, her mind already turning to the journey ahead. She would take the morning stage to Phoenix, a trip that would require an overnight stay in Prescott. If all went well, she would be back within 5 days. She had just finished packing a small valise when there was a knock at her door. Opening it, she found Quentin standing there, a bouquet of wildflowers in his hand. "To congratulate our school teacher on her first successful day," he said, presenting the flowers with a flourish. "They're beautiful," Abigail exclaimed, accepting the bouquet and stepping back to invite him in. "Thank you. How did you know it was successful?" "I spoke with Jacob Henderson in town," Quentin explained. "He said his boys couldn't stop talking about their new teacher and all they learned today, even William, who's been fighting against the very idea of school for years." Abigail smiled, pleased by the report. "He's a bright boy. He just needs to see the value in what he's learning." "Well, you've made a good start," Quentin said, watching as she arranged the wildflowers in a jar of water. "I've come bearing news as well as flowers. Your travel arrangements are all set. Stage ticket to Prescott tomorrow, connecting to Phoenix the following day. A room at the Prescott house for tomorrow night and at the Adams Hotel in Phoenix for 2 nights after that." "Thank you for arranging everything," Abigail said sincerely. "It's a relief to have those details taken care of." "I wish I could go with you," Quentin said, regret clear in his voice. "But with the cattle drive, I understand completely," Abigail assured him. "I'll be fine. It's not my first time traveling alone." Quentin nodded, though he still looked concerned. I know you're capable, it's just, he trailed off, seeming to search for words. What is it? Abigail prompted gently. I've only just found you, he said finally, and already you're going away. Even if it's just for a few days, I'll miss you. The simple admission touched Abigail deeply. I'll miss you too, she replied softly, but I'll be back before you know it, hopefully with good news about support for the school. Quentin crossed the small room to stand before her, taking her hands in his. Abigail, he began, his voice low and earnest, before you go, I want you to know how much you've come to mean to me. These past weeks have been the happiest of my life. Mine too, Abigail whispered, her heart full. When I pulled you from that fire, Quentin continued, I had no idea I was also saving my own future happiness, but that's what you've become to me, my happiness, my hope. He raised one hand to gently touch her cheek. I love you, Abigail Walker. Abigail's breath caught at his declaration, even though some part of her had known it was coming. The depth of feeling in his blue eyes left no room for doubt about his sincerity. I love you too, Quentin, she replied, the words coming naturally, as though she had been waiting to say them all along. I think I have from the moment you carried me away from that burning ranch. The smile that illuminated his face was like the sun breaking through clouds. He drew her into his arms, holding her close as though she were precious beyond measure. Then he lowered his head and kissed her, a kiss filled with tender passion and promise. When they finally parted, Quentin rested his forehead against hers. Come back to me quickly, he murmured. I will, Abigail promised. Nothing could keep me away. The journey to Phoenix was long and dusty but uneventful. Abigail spent the night in Prescott as planned, then continued on to the territorial capital the following day. The Adams Hotel proved to be a comfortable establishment, and she was grateful for Quentin's foresight in making reservations. Her meeting with Superintendent Harrison was scheduled for the next morning. Abigail dressed carefully in her most professional attire, a navy blue skirt and crisp white blouse, with her hair arranged neatly beneath a simple hat. She brought with her all her credentials and references, as well as detailed plans for the Two Pines School. The Territorial Education Office was housed in an imposing stone building in downtown Phoenix. Abigail arrived precisely on time, presenting herself to the clerk who showed her into Superintendent Harrison's office. Alexander Harrison was a tall, distinguished man with silver-streaked dark hair and keen gray eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He rose as Abigail entered, greeting her with a firm handshake. Miss Walker, welcome to Phoenix. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Thank you for seeing me, Superintendent, Abigail replied, taking the seat he indicated across from his desk. I must say, your school has generated quite a bit of interest, Harrison commented, settling back into his chair. It's not often we hear of a private initiative of this kind in the more remote areas of the territory. Mr. McAllister has been extraordinarily supportive, Abigail acknowledged. Without his generosity, the school would not exist. Yes, I understand he provided both the building and your accommodations, Harrison remarked, a slight note of inquiry in his voice. Abigail felt her cheeks warm but maintained her composure. Mr. McAllister converted an unused bunkhouse into a schoolroom. My residence is a separate cabin previously occupied by his housekeeper's grandson. If Harrison had any thoughts about the propriety of this arrangement, he kept them to himself. I see, and you've already begun instruction? Yes, just this week, Abigail confirmed. We have 17 students enrolled, ranging in age from 6 to 14. Impressive, Harrison murmured, examining the documents she had provided. And your credentials are certainly in order. Boston Normal School, 5 years teaching experience in Massachusetts. What brought you to Arizona Territory, if I may ask? Abigail gave him a brief account of her circumstances, her parents' deaths, her position with the Thorntons, the fire that had changed everything. Harrison listened attentively, nodding occasionally. A remarkable journey, he commented when she had finished, and now you find yourself establishing a school in the wilderness. It's hardly wilderness, Abigail corrected gently. The area around Quartzsite is developing rapidly. These children deserve an education as much as those in more settled regions. I couldn't agree more, Harrison said, his expression warming. Which is why I'm pleased to inform you that the territory of Arizona is prepared to officially recognize Two Pines School as a registered educational institution, with all the benefits that entails. Abigail's heart leaped with joy. That's wonderful news, Superintendent. Thank you. There will be some paperwork, of course, Harrison continued, and we'll need to conduct periodic inspections to ensure educational standards are being met. But based on your credentials and the plans you've submitted, I have no concerns in that regard. They spent the next hour discussing specifics textbooks the territory could provide, requirements for record keeping, the modest stipend Abigail would receive as a certified teacher. By the time she left the superintendent's office, Abigail was carrying not only the official certification for Two Pines School, but also a promise of books and supplies to be delivered within the month. Her business in Phoenix concluded more quickly than expected. Abigail was able to secure passage on the afternoon stage back to Prescott. She sent a telegram to Quentin with the good news and her revised travel plans, hoping it would reach him before her return. The return journey seemed even longer than the outbound trip, her eagerness to be back at Two Pines making each mile stretch endlessly. But finally, 3 days after her departure, the stage rolled into Quartzsite. Abigail had expected to find Ellis waiting with the wagon, as they had arranged. Instead, to her delight, it was Quentin himself who stood on the boardwalk, scanning the passengers as they descended from the coach. "Quentin," she exclaimed as he strode forward to meet her, "I didn't expect you to come yourself." "Wild horses couldn't have kept me away," he replied, taking her carpetbag with one hand and her elbow with the other. "I got your telegram. Congratulations on your success." "Thank you," Abigail said, beaming up at him. "It went even better than I hoped." The superintendent was very supportive and will be receiving books and supplies soon. "I knew you'd impress him," Quentin said proudly, leading her to where his buggy waited. "The whole town's talking about our school and its remarkable teacher." Once they were settled in the buggy and heading out of town toward Two Pines, Quentin turned to her with a more serious expression. "I missed you, Abigail. These few days felt like months." "I missed you too," she admitted, her heart warming at his words. "I couldn't wait to get back." "To your school?" he asked, a hint of teasing in his voice. "To my school," Abigail acknowledged. "And to you." She placed her hand over his where it rested on the reins. "Especially to you." The smile that spread across his face was like sunshine. "I have something to ask you," he said, his voice suddenly solemn despite his smile. "Something I've been thinking about since the moment you left." Abigail's heart began to race. "What is it?" Quentin guided the buggy to the side of the road and brought it to a halt. He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Abigail Walker, I know we haven't known each other long, but I'm certain of my feelings. I love you. I want to build a life with you here at Two Pines." He took a deep breath. "Will you marry me?" Though she had begun to suspect this might be coming, the actual question still took Abigail's breath away. But her heart knew the answer immediately. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain. "Yes, Quentin, I'll marry you." Joy bloomed across his face. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a delicate gold ring set with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. "It was my mother's," he explained, sliding it onto her finger. "Sarah insisted I keep it, said I'd find someone special to give it to someday." "It's beautiful," Abigail whispered, tears of happiness blurring her vision. "I'll cherish it always." Quentin leaned forward to kiss her, a kiss filled with love and promise. When they finally parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "You've made me the happiest man in Arizona territory." "And I'm the happiest woman," Abigail replied, her heart so full it felt it might burst. They continued their journey to Two Pines, talking excitedly about plans for their future together when they would marry, how they would combine their lives and work. By the time they reached the ranch, they had decided on a wedding before winter set in. With just enough time for Abigail to write to a few friends in Boston, she wished to invite, and for Quentin to send word to his sister in California. News of their engagement spread quickly through the small community. Martha was the first to offer congratulations, embracing Abigail warmly when they shared the news that evening. Ellis too expressed his pleasure, shaking Quentin's hand vigorously and telling Abigail she had done the boss a world of good already. The students and their families were equally delighted when they learned of the upcoming marriage between their teacher and the owner of Two Pines Ranch. Even William Henderson, still pretending indifference to most things related to school, mumbled a shy "Congratulations, Miss Walker," when his father brought him and his brothers to class the following day. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity as Abigail divided her time between teaching, planning the wedding, and preparing for her new role as Quentin's wife. The Territorial Education Office delivered the promised books and supplies, enriching the school's resources beyond what Abigail had dared hope. Martha insisted that Abigail should move into the main house after the wedding rather than Quentin joining her in the small cabin. "It's only proper," the older woman declared, "and practical too. That house was built for a family." A family. The word filled Abigail with a warm glow whenever she thought of it. She had come west alone, seeking merely employment and independence. Now she was gaining not just a husband but the promise of children, a true home and deep roots in this land that had initially seemed so foreign. Ellie Thornton volunteered to help with wedding preparations, throwing herself into the task with characteristic enthusiasm. "It's the most romantic thing I've ever heard," she sighed dreamily as she and Abigail sewed bunting to decorate the ranch yard for the celebration. Rescued from a burning barn by a handsome rancher who then asks you to live with him, it's like something from a novel. Abigail laughed at her friend's romantic view. It wasn't quite that simple, and he didn't exactly propose that night. But he did say live with me, Ellie pointed out. That was the beginning. Anyone could see that. Perhaps Ellie was right, Abigail reflected. Perhaps their story had been written from that first desperate night when Quentin had pulled her and Ellie from the flames. Or perhaps it had been written even earlier, in whatever grand design had brought her west from Boston in the first place. The wedding took place on a perfect October day, with the cottonwoods along the creek turned golden and the air crisp and clear. Quentin had insisted on building a proper arbor for the ceremony, setting it up in the ranch yard with the main house as a backdrop. Lanterns were strung from poles, ready to be lit as evening fell and the celebration continued. Abigail wore a gown of ivory silk that had arrived just days before, ordered from a dressmaker in Prescott based on measurements Martha had taken. Ellie had woven wildflowers into her hair, which she wore down for the occasion, falling in soft waves past her shoulders. As she waited inside the house for the ceremony to begin, Abigail was surprised by a knock at the door. Opening it, she found James Thornton standing there, looking somewhat uncomfortable in his Sunday best. "Mr. Thornton," she greeted him, puzzled by his presence just before the ceremony was due to start. "Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine, Miss Walker Abigail," he corrected himself. Well, Ellie mentioned that you have no family here to give you away, and I thought, if you'd permit me, I'd be honored to escort you down the aisle. After all, if it weren't for you, my Ellie might not be here today." Tears welled in Abigail's eyes at the unexpected offer. "I would be honored, Mr. Thornton. Truly." And so it was that Abigail Walker walked toward her future husband on the arm of James Thornton, while Ellie preceded them, scattering flower petals along the path. The entire community had turned out for the occasion, ranchers and townspeople alike, along with all of Abigail's students, scrubbed clean and on their best behavior for their teacher's special day. But Abigail saw only Quentin, waiting for her beneath the arbor, his face alight with love and joy as she approached. He took her hands in his as she reached him, his blue eyes never leaving hers as they spoke their vows before the minister from Quartzsite. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared at last. "You may kiss the bride." As Quentin's lips met hers in their first kiss as a married couple, Abigail felt a sense of rightness, of completion, that she had never known before. This was where she belonged, not just at Two Pines Ranch or in the Arizona Territory, but here, with this man, building a life together. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night, with food and dancing and congratulations from everyone in attendance. Quentin's sister Sarah had made it from California with her husband and children, bringing tears to Quentin's eyes when she surprised him the day before the wedding. Now she embraced Abigail warmly, welcoming her to the family with genuine affection. "He's never been happier," Sarah told Abigail as they watched Quentin dance with one of his young nieces, the child standing on his feet as he guided her around the makeshift dance floor. "Thank you for that, for loving him." "It's the easiest thing I've ever done," Abigail replied honestly. Loving him? As the evening progressed, Quentin found his way back to his bride's side, slipping an arm around her waist. "Happy Mrs. McAllister," he murmured in her ear. The new name sent a thrill through Abigail. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," she assured him, turning to meet his gaze. "And you, Mr. McAllister, I have everything I ever wanted," he replied simply, "and more than I ever dared hope for." Later, after the guests had departed and the newlyweds had retired to the main house, now their home together, Quentin took Abigail in his arms once more. "You remember what I said to you the night of the fire?" he asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face with gentle fingers. "Live with me," Abigail quoted softly. "The best words I ever spoke," Quentin said, his voice husky with emotion. "Thank you for saying yes." "Thank you for asking," Abigail replied, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "For saving me from the fire, and for giving me a home and a future I never dreamed of." As they held each other in the quiet of their bedroom, the sounds of the ranch settling around them, Abigail reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the tragedy of her parents' deaths to the desperation of that fiery night at the Thornton Ranch, every step had led her here to Quentin, to Two Pines, to the life she was now beginning as Abigail McAllister. It wasn't the future she had imagined when she first came west, but it was infinitely better than anything she could have planned for herself. And as Quentin's arms tightened around her, she knew with absolute certainty that the fire that had seemed to destroy her world had actually been the beginning of everything good and true in her life. 5 years later, Abigail stood on the porch of the Two Pines Ranch house, watching as children spilled out of the schoolhouse at the end of another day. The school had grown from its humble beginnings to a proper institution with 26 students and a second teacher, Ellie Thornton, who had discovered her own passion for education through helping Abigail. The ranch had prospered as well, expanding its operations and adding several new buildings, including a larger barn and additional housing for the growing number of workers. Quentin had become known throughout the territory as a progressive rancher who embraced new methods while respecting the land and its resources. But the greatest joy in Abigail's life was the small figure now racing across the yard toward her, their son, 4-year-old James, named for the man who had given Abigail away at her wedding and who had become like a father to her in the years since. "Mama." James called, his dark hair so like his father's flopping as he ran. "Look what I made in Aunt Ellie's class today." Abigail knelt to receive both her son and the somewhat lopsided clay pot he thrust proudly toward her. "It's beautiful, darling," she said, examining it with appropriate admiration. "We'll put it right on the mantel where everyone can see it." "Papa too?" James asked eagerly. "Papa especially," Abigail assured him. "He'll be so proud." As if summoned by the mention of his name, Quentin appeared from the direction of the barn, dusty from the day's work but smiling broadly at the sight of his wife and son. He swung James up into his arms, accepting the boy's excited chatter about his creation with genuine interest. "It's excellent craftsmanship," he declared seriously, winking at Abigail over their son's head. "You have a real talent, young man." James beamed at the praise, then wriggled to be set down. "Can I go show grandfather? He's in his workshop." James referred to Ellis, who had semi-retired from his foreman duties and now spent much of his time crafting furniture in a small workshop Quentin had built for him. The old cowboy had become a surrogate grandfather to James, a role he clearly cherished. "Yes, but don't stay too long," Abigail instructed. "Dinner will be ready soon." As James ran off, Quentin turned to his wife, drawing her into his arms for a kiss. "How are my two favorite people today?" he asked, one hand gently resting on the slight swell of her abdomen. "We're both well," Abigail replied, covering his hand with her own. At 4 months along, her second pregnancy was just beginning to show. "Though your daughter has been quite active this afternoon." "Daughter, is it?" Quentin asked with a raised eyebrow. "You seem very certain." "Just a feeling," Abigail said with a smile, "but we'll be happy either way." "Yes, we will," Quentin agreed, his expression softening as he looked at his wife. Even after 5 years of marriage, he still gazed at her with the same wonder and love as on their wedding day. "Have I told you today how much I love you, Mrs. McAllister? You might have mentioned it this morning," Abigail teased, "but I wouldn't mind hearing it again." "I love you," Quentin said simply, his blue eyes holding hers. "More each day if that's possible." "I love you too," Abigail replied, raising a hand to touch his cheek. "And I thank God every day for that fire." Quentin's eyebrows rose in surprise. "The fire that nearly took your life, the fire that brought you to me," Abigail corrected gently. "That led you to pull me from the flames and say those words that changed everything. Live with me," understanding dawned in Quentin's eyes. "The best decision I ever made," he said softly, "asking you to stay." "And the best decision I ever made was saying yes," Abigail replied. She glanced around at the prosperous ranch, the thriving school, and their beautiful son now returning from Ellis's workshop. "Look at all we've built together, Quentin, all from that one moment." Quentin followed her gaze, pride and contentment evident in his expression. "And we're only just beginning," he said, his arm tightening around her waist. "The best is yet to come." As they turned to enter their home together, Abigail knew he was right. From the ashes of that long-ago fire had risen not just a school or a marriage, but a true partnership, a family, and a love that continued to grow stronger with each passing day. It was everything she had never known she wanted, and more than she had ever dared to dream. And it had all begun with a burning barn, a daring rescue, and 5 simple words. "Live with me."